Now we have a presentation on the HTA turn time report. Roger Wu.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Alex Chern from HTA. He's going to give the board an update on the truck turn time study that the organization has been conducting. Thank you.
Great. Mr. President and Commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. This is a really important project on behalf of the Harbor Trucking Association and on behalf of our 100-plus members. We're really proud to share it with the Port Commissioners and staff tonight. It's been an extremely exciting and important project. It's been a long time in the making, and again, we're very excited and pleased that this metric and this tool now exists for the industry. I know we're constrained on time and we've got a busy agenda tonight, so I'll get through the presentation as quickly as I can. Just a quick bullet point on what we're now calling the study, and we got away from calling it a study. We figured that a study implied that it was a snapshot in time and that it was a standalone project. This is not intended to be a standalone project. This is a living, breathing document, much like trade receives the peers data on a monthly basis to track cargo movement. To date, there is no tool in the industry that exists to track performance at the terminal gates. So we are now naming it the Truck Mobility Data Project. It was launched officially by the Harbor Trucking Association in January of 2013. The intent initially was to aggregate all of the GPS data from our member trucks and to track that data. We started with about 200 or 300 trucks on a test basis. Subsequently, that has now grown to 1,600 trucks that we're actively monitoring in Southern California that call at both the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach. And just to give you some perspective, about 3.5 years ago, the port participated in a similar study, which was a snapshot in time to see how turn times were at the gates. That sample size was about 200 to 250 trucks. So by orders of magnitude, this is clearly the largest study to date that's been done with drayage trucks in Southern California or anywhere that we know of. Again, the purpose of the study was to collect visit time data, including queue time. You may recall that the study that PurePass sponsored in part a number of years ago tracked the in-terminal time. But we as a trucking community obviously use a different metric. In-terminal time is a useful tool to us, but with the number of trucks that we have and the number of customers that we serve, the long lines at the gates are clearly something that's important, and nobody was tracking that, and we intended to do that with this study. We also wanted to track the data across all days of the week and shifts at all the terminal gates, again, both at Port of LA and Port of Long Beach, and then generate a monthly report that we could give to our customers, the BCOs and other stakeholders that were interested in the data, showing what the terminal averages were by terminal, by day of week, and by time of day. I think context is important here, and we've received a lot of questions over the last few days as to why we did this study, why we spent as much money as we did, and we put so much time and effort into it. For those who have been in the port business, you know that truckers typically have been at the bottom rung or perceived at being at the bottom rung of the supply chain ladder. And we, quite frankly, never had a seat at the policy table. The Clean Trucks program changed that, and subsequent to that, our industry has become much more contracted in number, but certainly more organized, and we feel much more of a powerful organization. Turn times and congestion are our single biggest issue. If you pick up the phone and you call any of your BCOs that use the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, you talk to any of the terminal operators, you talk to any of the 3PLs, you talk to anybody involved in logistics, they will tell you that right now turn times and congestion at the gates are the single biggest competitive issue that you are facing. And this is not standing in isolation. The misclassification efforts that you've seen over the last couple years with organized labor and some other groups cracking down on the trucking industry go hand in hand. To give you an example, historically, truckers serving both Port of LA and Port of Long Beach would typically get 4 or 5 turns in a shift within their hours of service constraints. Now, drivers are lucky to get 2. The average is 1. Again, the earlier turn time studies only counted in-terminal times. There had not been a study or any data collected showing what the queue times were. That was simply anecdotal. But again, the metric for the BCOs and the LMCs is different than those of the terminal operators. And I think Bruce Wargo and PurePass and the rest, we can all agree on that. Queue time matters to us. And this is not just the Port of LA and Port of Long Beach. I recently had an opportunity to speak on a panel for the JOC back in New Jersey. And Jim Newsom, the executive director for the South Carolina Ports Authority, said that wait time at his ports were the single biggest competitive issue as well. And they are cracking down and trying to find what an acceptable metric is to get a truck in and out of their terminal facilities. Again, it's important to note that the terminal operators and others measure productivity typically by the moves against the vessel. How fast can they get cargo on and off a ship? But the rest of the supply chain, the truckers and the BCOs that they serve, measure productivity by the turns in a shift and how many times they can get to and from a distribution center or other destination. And again, there was no published or unpublished industry metric on this visit time until now. And all these other issues, pier pass, chassis, misclassification, go hand in hand with the ability to get trucks in and out of the gates as quickly and as efficiently as possible. I can tell you that there are other agencies that are interested in this data. The EPA and some of the air regulatory agencies are interested in this data from an environmental standpoint. What are the true costs of emissions? As I mentioned earlier, from a labor perspective, the impact that this has on contractor pay goes hand in hand with what we've been seeing, again, from organized labor and some of the other groups, and the general cost to the shipping public. This is where you as a port authority come in. This is a competitive issue. So we retained E2 Managed Tech, which I'm sure the port is familiar with, in 2013 to collect and aggregate this data. Greg Alexander will come up in just a few minutes to walk you through some of the details. But essentially their task was to collect the GPS data by terminal and rank the terminals on a monthly basis. Again, we grew in sample size from initially about 200 trucks to 1,600, which anybody would agree is statistically significant. The methodology was reviewed by a third party. This was very important to us that this study be as transparent and open as possible. We hired Parsons Brinkerhoff and some stranger named Thomas Yelenich to do the third-party review for this study. The goal was to launch a website, which we have done, at www.harbortruckers.com, and again, Greg will walk you through this in real time, that subscribers can now get this data on a monthly basis. So for January, you can see December's data, February, January's, and so on. And again, this is a living, breathing study, not just a snapshot in time, so this TMD will be updated monthly for our subscribers. This is the data that subscribers will be able to see, and it was important to the truckers to capture this data into various buckets. And again, this is an average of October through December of 2013, and the most important statistic on this chart for us is in the bottom right corner, and that is 22% of all the moves are taking more than 2 hours. For a trucker who's waiting in line, for a BCO that's paying wait time, for a port that wants to market itself as being competitive, this is a very, very compelling statistic. I'm going to call up Greg Alexander to walk you through some of the details of this slide and then the website. Greg.
Thanks very much, Alex, and thanks, commissioners, for having us and the opportunity to present here. As Alex mentioned, this slide is an average of the last 3 months worth of data, October through December. You can see individual rows for individual terminals, quite a bit of variety there in the average visit time we're seeing across terminals. You know, some up in the 80s and 90-minute averages, and others, you know, let's say Madsen at a very fast 32-minute average visit time. And then the individual buckets of, you know, percent of moves that are occurring in an hour or less. Those moves that are the percent occurring between 1 and 2 hours, and then the 22% that are taking more than 2 hours. Yeah. And with that, I'd like to briefly take you through the website that Alex mentioned, where subscribers have access to this data. If you'll bear with me here as this loads. Again, as Alex mentioned, it's available through the Harbor Trucking Association website at harbortruckers.com. Subscriber-based login system here. And with that, users to the system have the ability to select the data they'd like to see. So you can choose, perhaps you'd like to see all terminals. You could choose a specific terminal, and the data will load there. You can look at a variety of different graphs and charts that either show the variety across days of the week, the aggregate percentage of moves across you're seeing at a terminal, visit time and queue time based on the time of arrival at the gate. And again, users have the ability to look either at the last month or, in this case, the last 3 months. And again, cycling through the different terminals, either a particular one you'd like to drill into, or again, all the terminals in general. So, as Alex mentioned, we're very, very proud to be able to make this data available, and obviously very, very thankful for the opportunity to bring it up to you. I will kick it back to Alex here, but if you have any questions after the fact, I'd be happy to answer them. So, thanks very much.
So again, just to wrap up, one of the reasons we put this study together was not for it just to exist in a vacuum. We obviously want this to be an agent for change and a discussion point going forward. Jim Newsom said something at that JOC conference which was very interesting, and that is he sat down with the stakeholders and decided or came up with what was an acceptable turn time. Is it an hour? Is it an hour and a half? And they agreed upon an hour. So they're looking at ways to work into the tariff structure, as has New York, New Jersey, quite frankly, on what's an acceptable metric that the terminal operators can live with and that the trucking community can live with. So we very much saw this as a chance to dialogue with the rest of the stakeholders. There was initially a Port of Long Beach, Port of Los Angeles stakeholder group that was put together and that has since been disbanded. We would urge you tonight, please look at ways that your staff can restructure that we can get that stakeholder group back working, where you have not only the truckers but the MTOs and, most importantly, the BCOs in the room. The BCOs are among our first subscribers to this data, and that's not a coincidence. They want to see where the efficiencies are, what terminals are performing better than others, what days of the week are better than others, what times of days are better than others. They are part of this solution. It is their system. They pay for it. And we need to have them at the table for any future stakeholder group discussions on what we do with this data. We also have to look at PeerPass. We put out there very publicly that we need to look at a 24/7 system, and is there a way to get from here to there? Is there a revenue structure or stream in place? Is it viable to charge a cargo fee across all the cargo, as opposed to the current $140 PeerPass fee we have now, to try to keep the gates open 24/7 so that we can smooth out that cargo flow throughout the day and the night? And how do we implement a dynamic appointment system? We had these discussions before, but they fell short, quite frankly, because there was no data. We now have the data, so that excuse no longer exists, and we would implore you to please put that stakeholder group together again with the BCO's participation. If you do that, again, it's a competitive issue. We'll gain productivity across all sectors of the supply chain. You'll remain competitive, avoid diversion, and you'll realize greater efficiencies. Before I wrap up, I want to quickly thank some of those who participated in this study. Thomas Yelenich, as I mentioned before, Ashley White, Greg Alexander, and Jolene Hayes, who I believe is in the audience. Again, we're very proud of this study, and I had the chance to read an article by Bruce Wargo that was published in the JOC on Friday, which starts off by saying that the conflict between truckers and MTOs is inevitable. We disagree. Not only do we not think it's inevitable, we want dialogue. That was the entire purpose of this study, and now we have a tool to do that. So some of our members are here to speak, and I thank you again for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I have 3 people who have signed up. The first speaker is Fred Joring.
I'm going to take Fred's place for just the first. He's going to go second or third.
Okay.
Okay? Is that okay? Good.
Sure.
So, good evening, Commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. There's several issues that I wanted to bring to your attention because there's an illusion that things are fine at the ports, but in reality, they are not. I'm the manager of the trucking operations at Port Logistics Group. I'm also the president of the Harbor Trucking Association. I came here tonight to tell you about issues that my company faces every day and at night, trying to pick up containers to deliver to our warehouses and many other clients. On a daily basis, we're challenged with what some would call insurmountable odds. Every day and night, we check availability at each marine terminal and plan for the day and night operation. We schedule container pickups at the marine terminals that require appointments. I'm telling you this because some would lead you to believe that the LMCs just send trucks to the port and don't check availability. This is simply not the case. Upon our arrival, the trucks wait until they reach the front of the line. This, as you can see by the data found in the HTA truck mobility data, the wait time in this line could be significantly long. When we're finally able to give the pickup information to the marine clerk, we are far too often told that the container is in a closed area, and there's no guarantee that that area will open up. We're far too often told that the marine terminal cannot locate the container, and the truck drivers are turned away. Keep in mind, we've checked availability, we've sent our trucks, we've formulated a business plan, and now we have to make other decisions on how to deploy that asset. What is the result? The first thing that comes to mind is that the customer will most likely not get the container that they have requested. If the truck is picking up during off-peak gates, there is very little trouble resolution, and in general, the pickup would need to take place at another time. But when would this be? In most cases, the driver is told the area is closed and call your dispatcher. We are not given many options or even a window that we could plan for future pickups. The secondary result is the driver has wasted valuable time and cannot be regained, and usually leaves the terminal with nothing, no container, and then must go to another terminal and go through the same process. And now, who is responsible to pay that driver and that truck for the time wasted? Who's going to explain to that customer why the container was not picked up? If the container is urgent and must be picked up dayside to avoid this supply chain disruption, who will pay the pier pass fee? Is it the BCO? Is it the trucking company? Or is it the marine terminal? Well, in many cases, the importer would expect the trucking company to pay for it. And if the importer is a real partner with the trucker, they'd pay for it. But lastly, again, who pays the truck driver for the time wasted? Currently, no one does. This happens every night and day. We have the same problems with the same marine terminal operators, and the fact is that they are responsible for these actions. So let's talk about the current conditions. The state of the port is bad at this time and has been in a steady downward spiral since November. Returning empty containers is a nightmare and is a very time-consuming process. The marine terminals devote most of their labor and assets to vessel operations and far less to moving the containers in and out of the terminal. The resources used to receive empty containers is less than is deployed to deliver import cargo. The trucks wait in lines and spend hours to get the empty containers off. And what happens? They miss appointments at another marine terminal, and the containers stay at the port. There are chassis shortages and diversions that are not being paid for by the leasing companies. The chassis providers are using the LMCs to reposition chassis and not pay for it. Most of the LMCs are sitting on overabundance of empty containers. Why? Because they can't return them. There's not enough time. Some companies turn empties in dayside and pull loads at night. That is not productivity. The productivity we need to keep up with the current and future volumes is simply not there, and there does not seem to be a port-wide solution around the corner. The HTA continues to support dialogue between the marine terminal operators to improve productivity. Our truck mobility data suggests that there are major productivity issues at many of the marine terminals, and there are very few that have gone outside of the box in an effort to improve productivity. We believe that the port has the authority to compel the marine terminal operators to provide a minimum standard of productivity for servicing the motor carrier. When these minimum standards are achieved on a regular basis, the marine terminal operators should be rewarded with some type of monetary incentive. No one has suggested that we impose a monetary penalty. The minimum standard is a 1-hour visit time, and the current method of delivering cargo to the truck and receiving an empty container, it'll never happen. It'll never happen in the current conditions, the way things are running now. I read an article on Friday published in the JOC that finally made me aware of why the situation at the port is where it is at. It is misguided rhetoric such as this that continues to keep the distance between the marine terminal operator and the drayage trucking industry coming together to exchange ideas and plans to make this port the most dynamic in the United States and possibly the world. We
Mr.
support
Johnson?
24/7 gates.
We're going to have to, you're either going to have to cut it off or Mr.
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
Thank
time.
you. Fred Joring, please.
Good evening. I am the real Fred Joring. I'm chairman of the Harbor Trucking Association, and as most of you probably know, I run Golden State Express. I own it and run it. My customers, first of all, I can say amen to everything Mike said, and I won't take as long to say it as he did. But my customers have expressed concerns about our ability to perform in the ports particularly in the last month. It seems that since Christmas, things have gotten gravely deteriorated from where they were even before. In response to their concerns, I will cite some of the things I wrote to them without reading an email that's 2 pages long. But there are several points I made to them that I thought they needed to be aware of. One is about our ability to perform and our ability to get their containers delivered. Couple points. We've had extremely long wait times at the terminals. After waiting to get in, and I think Mike has mentioned some of these, there are more UTL unable to locate containers than we've ever seen, that I have ever seen in my experience at the ports. Containers being in closed areas. If they haven't identified it on the web tracing, which we religiously check, we dispatch against it. And when we get in the terminal, after waiting in line to get in, we go to the trouble window and have to report it in a closed area. However, if they report it as in a closed area before, we don't dispatch on it. And we've gotten a lot of pushback on that, and our customers don't understand it. If it shows in a closed area, why would I send a driver after it? But yet the terminals the next day say, you didn't send a driver after it, so we're not going to waive the last 3-day issues. Again, there's been an extreme shortage of chassis at many of the terminals, which creates additional wait time and dry runs like we've never seen before, ever. The terminals say, bring your own chassis. From where? Where's a chassis pool that we can go pick up from and bring it in at night? None that I know of. Our ability to deliver loads has been reduced by at least 35% of what our normal operation has been in the past months. Because of this, we have to pull loads and defer returning the empties, like Mike said, which is costing us in both per diem and storage. And the per diem bills are rolling in. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. How we'll cover it, God only knows, but we have to put priority on the loads. That's what I've told my clients, and they still express a lot of concerns. I hope we see results in getting things changed with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vic LaRosa? Mr. LaRosa.
President Drummond, Commissioners, thank you so much. I'm going to make my comments very, very brief. The first gentleman you heard from is Mike Johnson. He's the president of the Harbor Trucking Association. The second gentleman you heard from is Fred Joring. He's the chairman of the Harbor Trucking Association. I'm the president and CEO of a transportation company called TTS-I, and I'm also sit on the executive board of the HTA, and I also sit on the executive committee of the California Trucking Association. And I would appeal to you to look at this logically. Why would the trucking community come together and spend in excess of $150,000 and mounting on this study if this was not a continual, ongoing problem? I just leave you with that thought, and I thank you and I implore you to pull the stakeholders group together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. LaRosa. Commissioners, any comment? Commissioner Dines.
Yes, thank you, President Drummond. Can we hear from staff on what efforts have been made to pull together a stakeholder group and how we would go about achieving that goal?
Yes, Commissioners, Roger Wu, our marketing manager, will be happy to address that.
Okay, Commissioner, my understanding is there's an effort between the two ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles to get together to reform this stakeholder group. My understanding also is that our executive director, Al Morrow, he should be in conversation with the executive director of Port Los Angeles to direct the staff to reformat this stakeholder group, and I believe this effort is continuing, and the staff are going to work hard on this.
Just a couple of follow-up questions. How have we been interacting with the HTA and using this information to try to help the stakeholder group come to some conclusions that make sense within a reasonable period of time?
Commissioner, I'm not personally involved with that, but the other staff, Mr. Mascaro, he is personally involved with the effort. I'm not sure if he's. Oh, he's in the audience. I would like to defer to him to answer a few questions regarding to the usage of the data and the discussion with the stakeholders.
Thank you.
The microphone is yours.
Good evening, Brett Mascaro, Business Development Manager in Trade. Following up on the question regarding the HTA involvement, we attend the monthly meetings with the HTA. We are a subscriber to the HTA Turn Time Study, or I'm sorry, Truck Mobility Data, the new titled report. And so we receive this as it's published. We just recently received the November data and December data this week. Previously, it was just the October snapshot. So it's rolling in pretty quickly in real time. Additionally, in order to move the process forward with the stakeholder group, we're looking forward to getting some executive level dialogue going.
Commissioner Wise?
Yeah. My recollection is that we talked about this at a meeting in November, and also that there were some issues raised then about the need to get FMC approval for a stakeholders discussion group about this. Am I right about that, Dominic?
Commissioner, FMC discussion approval is often necessary for these kinds of groups. Because competitors are sitting in a room, and to get the benefit of the antitrust exemption that's provided by the FMC discussion agreement rule, we sometimes need a new agreement. We have several agreements in place, as do many of our customers. For example, the terminal operators have a discussion agreement. We can sometimes bridge to that, is the term of art used by the FMC, that the two ports have a discussion agreement. They bridge to a third discussion agreement, and that pulls all the participants into the same room. I don't know the status of this particular discussion agreement.
Okay. Well, I think this is a really important issue, and I'm concerned that with the agenda we have this evening, there's not going to be sufficient time for us to have a full discussion on it. So my thought would be that we schedule a special meeting, a workshop or whatever, where we could have all the stakeholders here, and perhaps in advance of that, the city attorney or whomever could provide us some of the information that we need about what approvals we might need to get from the FMC. But anyway, in that context of a meeting solely devoted to this issue, we could explore our options and maybe come out with some idea about how we move forward on this. So that would be my thought. I don't think this is an action item, so we can't take any action, but my hope would be that we would work towards having a special meeting of that sort.
I appreciate that. I believe this touches on the productivity of both ports and our competitiveness today. Commissioner Dines.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brett, don't go anywhere. I started working on the waterfront in 1997 at a time when 3 million TEU was, well, that was a really busy port. And we were going through this period where we saw double-digit growth annually. And it got so bad in 2004, we had so much congestion in our two ports that we were being told, you need to do something. And we were being told by Sacramento. So the industry came together and we created Pier Pass, which allowed us to have off-peak or night gates. And that in itself probably increased capacity of our terminals by 40%. And I've been someone that's been an advocate for looking at 24/7 operations for quite some time. I know I've been probably saying it on this microphone for at least 2 years. I know there's opposition to that because we're looking at the cost of what it would cost to have 24/7 operations. We're not talking enough about the cost savings of the efficiency of a 24/7 port. We're not talking enough about what it means to port customers to have the reliability of a 24/7 port. We're not talking about the competition with Canada, Mexico, the Pacific Northwest, and the Panama Canal, and what a 24/7 port complex would mean to that competition. I don't know anyone here that could argue they're more sympathetic to the plight of the truckers than myself. I am the marine clerk that has to tell them, sorry, your container you're looking for is in a closed-off area, come back tomorrow. I'm the marine clerk that is directing a top handler or a transtainer driver to deliver a container that is buried at the bottom of a stack, and I've got 50 trucks in line because there's not enough machines or labor to service those truckers. And I'm the one that sees truckers wait 3 or 4 hours to try and get a container and see them pull into a terminal at 10 a.m. and sorry, it's lunchtime, we didn't make it to you, we'll be back in an hour. And hopefully we get it started up again at 1 o'clock and get you that container. Something has to be done. And I'm not suggesting that the solution is that we put it all on the backs of our marine terminal operators. Carriers are demanding more productivity at the vessel, but carriers have contracts with BCOs and other customers that are demanding they get access to their containers. This is a system that isn't working as well as it needs to. So we're going to have to work together to find the efficiencies, and we're going to have to get these turn times down. Maybe the solution is we go 24/7. Maybe another solution is the ports look at this potential for a cost or a fee per container. And instead of having a traffic mitigation fee, perhaps the ports could take over what we would call Pier Pass, and the ports could administer it themselves. Maybe it's $10 a container for every single container. And maybe that will bring enough money in to help the marine terminal operators move to a 24/7 model and allow these truckers to be rewarded for what they did. We have to go back only a couple of years, and in the worst of times, in our Great Recession, we as LA and Long Beach ports told the trucking community, you're going to buy new trucks. And they're at least $100,000. Some of them are $200,000. I think we owe it to them to do everything we can to fulfill our commitment to them for what they did for us. And they stepped up, they bought new trucks. We owe it to them to make their businesses viable, and we can't do it the way we're doing it today. So what I suggest, and thank you for standing there, Brett, I suggest that in fact, I want to make a motion to have staff review this study and report back to the board with recommendations to improve efficiencies and reduce turn times within 90 days. And the reason I have you standing there, Brett, is because I think you're the perfect person to work on this project. And we have asked the ports to come together. This board has directed the staff to work with the Port of Los Angeles on creating a turn time stakeholder group. This problem is not going to go away. We're going to have to work on real solutions. And if the argument is made right now that we don't need 24/7, well, when do we need it? We need it today so we can find the efficiencies and move cargo more effectively so we can attract that cargo for tomorrow. Our role is to protect jobs and create jobs, and I think we have a duty here. So I make that in the form of a motion, Mr. President.
I'd like to ask, because of the participant interest in this, that we follow Commissioner Wise's recommendation and make that a special meeting.
I think a special meeting is a great idea. I would at least appreciate the staff response that they would come back in 90 days.
Absolutely, but we could, what I mean is we could set a special meeting at that time when it comes back.
Wonderful.
Is that all right, Commissioner Wise? Sure. Any further comment? Is there any additional comment from the audience? There being none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Brent.